Hi, my name is Katya Dmitrieva. I'm a U.S. economics reporter at Bloomberg News in Washington, D.C., and that's actually where we are right now, at the headquarters of the IMF. So I'm sitting here with Paolo Mauro, Deputy Director, Fiscal Affairs at IMF, and we're going to be talking about the Fiscal Monitor. It's the October 2019 Fiscal Monitor report that was just launched today, just now actually. So you could read that story on the Bloomberg terminal. And right now we're going to be talking about the report. And I think the first big question, we're talking about climate change, we're talking about these developments, and especially in the last few weeks, we've had these mass protests. People are really talking about this and acknowledging the issue. What's the biggest takeaway that you would like people to take away from the report? What's the big takeaway from the Fiscal Monitor?
Katya, there's increasing concern about climate change. I think the general population is concerned about climate change. I'm frankly worried about the future of my own children. And for the IMF, climate change is something which has macroeconomic implications. So it's really central to our work. The key message of the Fiscal Monitor is that fiscal policy can be one of the key ingredients in solving the problem. So fiscal policies can be really key to fighting climate change. What we talk about in the Fiscal Monitor is how do you reshape the tax system? How do you reshape fiscal policies in a way that both reduces incentives for people and firms to emit carbon, but at the same time is something that ensures a better future for everybody? And I can talk to you about the various instruments.
Let's
I can
talk
talk to you
details,
about the implications for households. So the starting point for us is that we really need to step up the ambition of policies, because what the global community has put together so far is just not enough. What we estimate in the Fiscal Monitor is that we would need much more ambition in fiscal policies. To get an idea, we would need something like a global carbon tax of $75 by the year 2030. We're not saying that's the only way to go, but really we would need something as ambitious as a global carbon tax introduced today, rising pretty steeply, even if gradually, to $75 per ton of carbon emissions by the year 2030.
What are some of the other elements of this package? Because it's not just the carbon tax. You know, you cite a lot of different examples of how you can use fiscal policy, whether it's investment in renewables or taking, we talk about inequality a lot. So what are some other ways that governments can do that?
Exactly. So there's one thing, which is, do you use a carbon tax, or do you use emission trading permits, or do you use regulations? So there are choices to be made on how you discourage people and firms from emitting carbon. How do you encourage people to make their own choices about how to reduce energy consumption and to shift away from coal and other polluting fossil fuels towards cleaner energy. So that's one element of what we look at. We look at the pros and cons of different instruments, but perhaps even more important, how you construct a package of policies such that you take some of the revenues that you get through carbon taxation and you use those revenues in order to help people. There are various options. So one way you can do this is simply to cut other taxes. You can cut taxes on income, you can cut taxes on consumption. Some economists have put forward the proposal of just giving an equal dividend to everybody.
UBI, Andrew Yang.
Very much so, and we had something on that in a couple of fiscal monitors ago. But when we talk to political scientists, they tell us that there seems to be a preference on the part of the public for a package of policies that would take some of the revenues and devote them to investment in green energy. If we're talking about developing countries, you could think about taking part of the money and devoting it to investment in healthcare, education, meeting the sustainable development goals. So the bottom line is that we can work with governments to figure out a package of policies that is both economically efficient and gives a fair distribution of the burden throughout the population. The one thing I want to add is that when we construct these packages, we need to be very mindful of groups of people, communities that are particularly impacted by the transition And I'm thinking here, for example, of coal mining communities, because
Right.
as you transition away from coal, that's a group that would require a lot of support to ensure a better future for them.
Right, so like job retraining would be an example of something the government could do to wean the economy off of fossil fuels. So I thought that was an interesting example.
Indeed, or it could
yeah.
be something like cleanup of mines or building hospitals. So there's a whole range of policies, and it really depends on the particular circumstances.
How do you make it work politically? And I'm going to use the U.S. as an example because we're here. How do you see these policies playing out or working with the U.S. government, for example, to get these things done?
Well, I think, first of all, there's a lot of action already in the United States. Companies are doing a lot, states are doing a lot, so there is action here, and there's a lot of enthusiasm on the part of the population here and around the world. The United States is a key player in this. China, India, many other countries are very important emitters. One of our proposals in the Fiscal Monitor is to try and increase global ambition. Think about an international carbon price floor where the large emitters would kind of kickstart the process and agree on a common price floor. If we got the US, China, and India right there, you already have about half of global emissions. And so this would be a way of kickstarting greater ambition in these policies.
Yeah, and I guess the question is getting there, and that's why we had so many people on the streets, just a few weeks ago, and here in Washington, D.C., New York, all over the world, actually, just not just North America. What would you tell them? If they were here right now, what kind of message would you
I would
give
tell them, inform yourselves. I mean, it's great that there is this enthusiasm. Read the Fiscal Monitor, because there's a lot of information there. Find out about the science of climate change. Take some online courses from the University of Chicago. You can learn about the science of these things, and then channel that knowledge into persuading governments in your own country and globally to take more ambitious action. I do want to stress that if the current policies are implemented, we are just falling short. So if you
I think that's why they were on the streets.
If you go back to the Paris Agreement of 2015,
right.
You will remember that all the countries in the world committed themselves to national plans, and that's going in the right direction. But if you do the math, and we do the math in the report, you realize that it just doesn't add up. So if, and that's a big if countries do what they have committed themselves to do in Paris, we still will get global warming of 3 degrees centigrade.
That's right.
And the scientists have told us, and the Paris conference has accepted, that 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade is the extent of global warming that is safe and consistent with where we want to be. So we are very far away from that, and that's why it's important that we step up the degree of global ambition.
Yeah, and on that note, thank you so much for joining me here today, Paolo. And now it looks like we've run out of time, unfortunately. But thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Monitor 2019 discussion. Hopefully we'll see you guys soon. Thank you.